for the webinar on college readiness and implementing structures for student success. Basically, the content for this webinar is based off of David Conley's work on college knowledge. And basically, the crux of what David Conley is saying is that simply getting good grades in high school or a high SAT score does not equate to college readiness. Rather, there are deeper levels of knowledge and behaviors that are necessary for college success. And we did some thinking about how we can shape this information to better meet the needs of our students. And we plan to present to you that information today. So welcome.
All right. Hello, everyone. I'm Galen Brannon-Trottier, and I am one of the managers at Partner Support and Training. So it's good to be with you all this morning.
Thanks, Galen. My name is Phyllis Davis, Senior Manager of Training and Partner Support. Glad to have you, and glad that you are with us for this important information. So let's touch on workshop outcomes. The first is to increase awareness of the dimensions that support college readiness. Also, understand how particular strategies support college success, and identify implications for your work in supporting students to become college ready. So, a quick roadmap. We will start with an overview of Conley's research on college readiness. We'll also highlight the 5 dimensions of college readiness, again adapted to better fit the Gateway to College student. We'll reflect on excerpts and get your thoughts on a few quotes from the Redefining College Readiness article. And then we'll have an opportunity to touch base on some implications for your work.
All right. So let's talk very quickly about David Conley's research and his understanding and work around college readiness. As Chris has mentioned, the crux of what we're going to be doing today is using his work. And David Conley really is the guru on college readiness. Basically, almost anyone who's doing anything with college readiness uses David Conley's work to some degree. And the reason for that is that he's got a lot of experience behind what he's talking about. He has done quite a bit of research on the topic of college readiness. He's done some research in exemplar high schools across the country and has worked extensively interviewing faculty from universities and colleges around the country to talk about and to get a better understanding about what their expectations are as students enter their universities or their colleges. And so he really has developed some very foundational understandings about college readiness. As I said before, he really is the guru behind this, and just about everyone is using, to some degree, his work. So college readiness, defined kind of in general, is that most colleges look at college readiness as, can a student pass a basic college level, like a level 100 level course, without remediation? And so whatever the skills and abilities are that it takes for a student to do that, that's what makes a student college ready. And that's kind of the general way that people look at that. What we've realized, though, is that for our program, that definition doesn't really serve us well, because it's too late to do anything about a student being ready for college if they've already, for example, not passed that test. So we needed to come up with a way of looking at college readiness and defining it in a way that would better serve our students and our programs. And so what you're looking at now is what that definition is. And we see it really as a continuum. Students are not just an either or, but there's a continuum and a range of skills and abilities that students need to have and work towards over time in order to be successful in the secondary setting. In Conley's work, he defined 4 levels or 4 dimensions of college readiness. The key cognitive strategies, content knowledge, the academic behaviors, and contextual skills and awareness. But you'll notice here, though, in this visual, is that there's 5. There's a 5th one, which is a non-cognitive factors, and that's what we've added in our work as we talk about college readiness. So we see the dimensions of college readiness as being 5 dimensions. Those dimensions, as I just named, they are not neatly nestled together as they're shown in the visual, but they really do kind of bleed together and interact with one another. And so as we're talking about these dimensions, we're going to look at them individually, but please note that they really do relate and interact with one another. All right, so let's look first at dimension number 1, the key cognitive strategies. And you'll notice that as you kind of scan this slide, you'll see that we're talking about things such as inquisitiveness, analysis, problem solving. So the key cognitive strategy really is about critical thinking. So if you think about those key cognitive strategies, they really go into critical thinking, but also note that we're looking at the higher levels of critical thinking. We're not talking about the lower level of just knowledge and understanding, but we're really getting into the deeper, higher levels of critical thinking.
All right, for this next slide, what we're going to do is show some excerpts from David Conley's work. Again, the article that is published, it's a 2007 article, and it is called Redefining College Readiness. And as we go through these prompts, I'll definitely want to get your thoughts, your perspectives on the implications or how you've interpreted that information. And again, you can respond in one of 2 ways. You can send a text response through the chat panel, or you can raise your hand and I'll unmute you, and you can verbally convey your thoughts. So either one of those 2 ways is fine. And let's go ahead and move to the first excerpt that has to do with key cognitive strategies. And it says, these behaviors need to be developed over a period of time such that they become ways of thinking, habits, and how intellectual activities are pursued. And so I'd love to get your thoughts on how that resonates with you. Anyone have any thoughts? Okay, so my personal interpretation of this particular excerpt as it relates to key cognitive strategies is essentially it has to do with helping students develop intellectual behaviors and routines to the extent that those behaviors and routines become ingrained habits. And it's essentially a charge for the Gateway to College teams to be thinking about how am I helping students to develop those intellectual behaviors and routines. And we have some thoughts. We have a thought from Juanita. She says, developed over time until they become habits equal the good thing about college success skills is that they can be learned and with practice. And she also says students can improve those skills with that practice, and that is encouraging. Yeah, so Juanita basically jumped on that idea of it being a process over time, and I think that is really consistent with this idea of the continuum that Galen alluded to. So thank you for that. So this next quote has to do with contextual skills and awareness, and it says, contextual factors encompass primarily privileged information necessary to understand how college operates as a system and culture. Any thoughts on that? Okay. So my interpretation, essentially what that's saying is that the context of the college environment comes with a whole lot of norms, beliefs, practices, and information that our students aren't necessarily privy to. This knowledge, information, beliefs, and practices, that information can really be the difference between success or failure for our students. And so helping them understand what those hidden meanings that might not be present is a worthwhile endeavor towards college readiness.
Yeah, and Prentice, I want to add to what you were saying. I think you really noted that well. It's this idea of this privileged information. The students just may not know these kinds of things, especially first-generation students. And so one of the things that we need to do in our programs, it will be important for us to think about, is how do we really help uncover that? And I think you said that well. We really need to uncover for students what it means to be ready for college. What are some of the expectations of college? How does financial aid work? How does, what's the registration process? So really helping students understand that to the degree that they will be able to navigate that culture successfully.
Mm-hmm. And I think, you know, it's subtle, but it's very important. Two words in that excerpt, and it is privileged information. And so how do we move the privilege from around that information so others have access to it? All right, the third excerpt says, and this has to do with fostering college readiness. The intellectual climate of the school is a central element in college readiness because the school can't control this variable directly and relatively completely if its teachers and administrators choose to do so. So how does that strike you? All right, so I'll just jump in here and just say that from my perspective, this seems to be a reminder that the school controls the intellectual requirement, and it's a choice whether or not the staff and the faculty buy into that idea and make it a reality. So I think in there is a hidden charge for the staff and faculty at our programs.
All right, let's talk about another one of the dimensions of college readiness, which is the dimension of the key content, knowledge, and skills. And when we talk about that, we're thinking about the big ideas of the content area, which include the overarching, as it says in the slide, core content, knowledge, and skills. So let's for a moment unpack that. And what are we talking about here? Well, first of all, having an understanding of the Common Core requirements if your state happens to be using that, or if your state has any of the college or career readiness standards, that will be one place that you'll be able to find out what some of those big ideas or core knowledge expectations are for your state. Another aspect of understanding what we're talking about when we talk about those big ideas, we're talking about some of the work that you will find in the book Understanding by Design by Grant Wiggins and Jay McTighe. Okay, thank you, Jay McTighe. And when those big ideas that we're looking at or talking about are broad, abstract, kind of universal in application. They can be represented by different examples, but they all share a common attribute. And another way of looking at big ideas is that they provide a focusing conceptual lens for the study that points to the ideas that are really at the heart of the content that you're trying to help students understand. So there's one way of again, looking at that is using your Common Core to unpack that, but look for those broad, universal applications of information that really represent the heart of the content. And as we're talking about the overarching content knowledge, we know that in order to, in colleges and in higher ed, one of the ways that we help students understand whatever those big ideas happen to be is through the use of writing and research. So we talk about what's the overarching knowledge, and that's that idea of using writing and research as fundamental approaches to help students understand the big ideas of their content area. Here's a visual of what that looks like. So you are using reading and writing and research to address the core content. That might look like in math. We've got a visual there that shows you what that might look like in English and writing. And I'd like to add to that that another component that this might look like on the ground is the use of journals. So students are using math journals in their algebra class, for example, where they're journaling and writing about their understanding of a particular content or concept or a skill that they're learning. Again, for writing in English, them using writing in order to learn the key point or the key concept. And they're kind of unpacking that through the use of their own writing. It really offers a double whammy because it allows students to practice, again, those overarching key skills that they're going to be using over and over and over again, while at the same time exploring concepts and deepening their understanding. So let's also now move to academic behavior. And here we have, we're talking about metacognition and study skills. And these behaviors, again, support the academic work. And as we said earlier, there is some overlap and some kind of bleeding between those dimensions. And I think here's a good example of it. I think that you could consider, for example, metacognition as an academic skill or study skills as an academic skill. But what it takes in order to do that, for example, the metacognition and the reflection on your work and that kind of thing, could also be considered a non-cognitive variable or factor. So there is some, there is a lot of interaction between those dimensions. They're not just hard and fast silos.
All right, so this fourth dimension has to do with something that we've touched on a little bit when we responded to the excerpts. And this has to do with contextual skills and awareness. And again, this has to do with the importance, again, of uncovering to our students the conventions that exist at educational institutions. And the charge for programs will be, again, to help students understand the institutional and college culture. And then also to help students navigate those systems and help students know what's appropriate at an institution of higher learning.
All right, in our fifth dimension, we're talking about non-cognitive factors. And the non-cognitive factors really are ways of helping students understand or engage in the overall experience of the work that they're doing in their college growth and learning. So for example, and I'd like to look at some of these in some greater depth. So we talk about mindset. So it's helping students understand, for example, that fixed mindset and that what does that mean to have a fixed mindset versus a growth mindset? And how does that impact your learning as you're becoming college ready? So that mindset piece is, again, it could be considered a non-cognitive variable, but also an academic behavior. And it helps students know that their learning can change, that their intelligence can change. They can become smarter with practice and support, and that they don't have to, if they struggle in a particular area, they don't have to say, well, I'm not good at that, or I can never be good at that. We can help them understand that by having that growth mindset, they can grow and develop in areas that they might have previously seen as a challenge. They can rewrite their story as they change their mindset.
And what I like to say about these non-cognitive factors, the beauty of these non-cognitive variables is the fact that unlike your standardized tests, we're able to uncover insight into, again, those factors that may not show up in a standardized fashion, but we're able to assess a student's ability to be successful, and to a certain extent, as research substantiates, non-cognitive factors are important predictors of success. So the beauty of this is we can uncover areas where students have found success, for example, throughout the course of their daily lives in a way that standardized tests can't do that as a predictor of their ability to be successful in a higher education environment.
Mm-hmm. Let's also just talk a little bit more, too, about the non-cognitive factor of dealing with setbacks, for example. So helping a student understand and develop strategies for how they deal with challenges or obstacles that they're facing. Because as they move into a traditional college setting, we know, of course, that setbacks happen. So how do they develop the skills and the support in order to be, in order to develop and really be able to overcome those setbacks and those challenges, and have strategies to help them do that, so that they can continue being successful in developing the skills in that continuum of readiness?
You know, I think that setbacks piece is really important, and I'm thinking specifically about students in the Gateway to College program, in the sense that they're probably in our program because there have been some setbacks that they haven't dealt with very well. So we know that that's a skill that we need to work with them on. And then aspirations, what are their aspirations? We get a lot of that good information from our new student survey data, which says that in general our students do have aspirations for higher educational attainment.
Mm-hmm. And we also know that with those aspirations, that can help be a catalyst for them to continue and persist in their college experience. So again, bringing those to surface and helping students connect what they're currently experiencing in college and their coursework help them lead to the success of achieving the aspirations that they have is an important connection that we want to help students make.
Mm-hmm. And then one last thing about aspirations, somebody famous once said, if you believe, you can achieve. And I strongly believe that. I think the aspiration piece gives us a starting point with the students.
All right. So let's think about the implications for your work. So consider how this information that we've touched on, and granted during this webinar, we're really providing a very quick overview of the college readiness piece, and I'll mention this in greater depth, but we will be addressing this in more detail during the PLC. So just know this is kind of an appetizer to the PLC work that we're going to be doing. All right. So now let's talk about, again, the implications for your work, and let's talk about what you can do to foster college readiness. So for the first bullet, we're talking about creating a program that promotes intellectual development. And I think a good way to think about that is really taking the autopilot out of the learning experience. So really helping students to engage in deeper thinking and have a range of experiences and explorations that allow them to do that. So we're taking students out of the autopilot of just, you know, coming into class, doing the same old thing, possibly, but really challenging them to think deeply, challenging them to develop their intellect and their critical thinking ability, and we are providing, as programs, the structure and the support and the means for students to do that. That piece about incorporating or looking at those big ideas and having those appropriate challenges. Again, making sure that students understand what those big ideas are, and you know, first, making sure that faculty understand what those big ideas are so that they can clearly communicate that to students. And then incorporating forms of assessment that really engage students in reflection and engage students in allowing multiple opportunities to review and think through their work.
And Galen, what I hear you saying with regard to the program culture is, and your allusion to autopilot is, this stuff doesn't happen by happenstance.
Well said, Prentice. It really doesn't. This work, creating and helping students become college ready, is something that really takes intention and focus and a real structure and development. This is bringing folks together to really think through, how are we going to do this? Because we don't want to just have, we really want to challenge students and get them to move on that continuum. And that movement on the continuum of college readiness and students understanding where they need to move and the why and how that movement is going to happen, again, as you said, it isn't by happenstance. This must be done by design. And so these are some things that we want to think about as you're creating that college readiness culture in your school. All right, some other things that we can do. We talked some more about this, or we talked a little bit about this earlier, but those key cognitive strategies, really getting students involved in analysis and the critical thinking component, the higher level of Bloom's taxonomy, getting them in those areas, and then increasing the complexity over time. That's an important piece that we are we're helping students develop the academic muscle, and we're kind of giving them that foundation. We're building their academic muscle, and then getting them to the place that they're able to do more complex activities, more complex, deeper thinking over time. So this is something that's done with scaffolding, and again, with purpose. Another component of that is we're talking here also about having students to assume more control and responsibility for their learning. And this is huge. And there's ways of doing this by, and we've got some lists here, giving them opportunities to do rewrites, use rubrics, the different types of formative assessment that you might use that would allow a student to, again, learn from their mistakes, build on that new learning, and have another opportunity to practice.
You know, I like the piece about self-reflection. You know, everybody knows that story about the students when you ask them how they're doing in class, and they think maybe they're getting an A or a B, and maybe they're not even passing the class at all. And so that just highlights the importance of self-reflection so that students can have a realistic sense of where they are academically.
Absolutely, absolutely. All right. Other things for us to think about here: fostering that college readiness, providing the necessary support for students. And we've got some listings here of a variety of different things that you can do. But of this list, the one thing that I would like to highlight is the portfolio development. And I feel really strongly about the portfolio development because it really does give an opportunity to have a student compile examples of their work, And those examples of their work could be from all of these listings of things here that they might be doing, like understanding, being able to demonstrate to you through something, an artifact in their portfolio, what they understand about college admissions, or what they understand about financial aid, or what deeper understandings they have about their career and their aspirations. And so I just believe that the portfolio development really allows, it's a vehicle that allows a lot of potential, it has a lot of potential leverage in giving students opportunities to think about their work, to develop areas of their learning, and then be able to demonstrate that and then talk to people about that and use that portfolio as a learning tool and as a reflection tool that incorporates that metacognition about their learning. So I just believe that that's really a high leverage strategy that we should think about using more often.
Definitely. And, you know, one of my favorites on this list has to do with the guest speakers. It's something easy for programs to employ, but, you know, having guest speakers who are actually college students. In many of our Gateway to College programs, directors will have transitioning students write letters to new foundation students. And that's a way for the experienced student to transmit messages. It might be the same messages that the program staff is transmitting, but for some reason does not come through or does not sink in as fully as hearing from your peers. So I think there's tremendous value in hearing from your peers about what college is really like. I've noticed that students' ears perk up and they tend to listen more intently about what that college student is like, and it's a peer-to-peer interaction that we're supporting there.
Well said, Princess. Okay. All right. So let's talk a little bit more about other things that you can do to foster college readiness. And I'd like to kind of give you an opportunity to look at some of the lists here. At the bullets, we talked a little bit about the journals, for example. We talked about being able to engage students in some of the higher order thinking skills, using writing, for example. So there's just a variety of different experiences, and this slide really is to just provide a few of the examples that you might think about as ways to engage students in experiences that could support that the college readiness approach. All right. And we've got another slide that we'd like to talk a little bit more about, again, engaging not just the teacher, not the students now, but the teachers. So we know that this college readiness piece may involve, for some teachers, some approaches that might be a little bit different. And so let's talk about some of those things. One of the important aspects of creating college readiness is making sure that you have a professional, allow for some professional experiences where teachers can connect their practice. They can look at their content and key ideas and those big ideas and really clarify what those big ideas are. And a means that can happen through is the community of practice. So I would say that that's going to be a foundational component in helping students develop and foster college readiness. There needs to be a community of practice where faculty can come together and engage with professionals, one another, and focus and reflect on their work and their practice. And then in that professional, that community of practice, there should be time for faculty to think through and for everyone to be on the same page about what it means to be college ready. So really clarifying the vision of college readiness, what that means for individuals, what that means for your program. That's an important component. And then, as we mentioned, this happens through that community of practice. All right. So let's kind of review, and we're going to open this up very shortly here to get some discussion going. And we would love to really hear from you as we talk about this. But let's look at our outcomes. What we wanted to have happen here is we wanted to raise the awareness about the dimensions that support college readiness, those 5 dimensions. We want to make sure that people were very clear, or at least had more clarity about what those dimensions were. The key cognitive strategies, the academic behaviors, key content knowledge, the contextual skills and awareness, and then those non-cognitive factors. So again, making sure that people have some understanding about that. And then we wanted to look at some of the strategies that connect to those different dimensions and that can support what programs are doing in order to help students become more college ready. And then lastly, we wanted to have people think about, talk about, and identify the implications for their work in supporting students to become college ready. Because we know that some of this is going to be building on the good work that's already being done, and then some of this is going to be doing some things a little bit differently. So with that said, let's open this up for discussion and questions. And again, we would love to hear your thoughts about this. That might include, what are some of the things that you've heard today as we've talked that you're already doing, or some of the questions that you have about this work?
And there's a few who have lodged some comments, and if it's okay, I'd like to just unmute you. Fabiola, and looks like we have comments from James and Deb as well. So I'm going to go to Fabiola and unmute you, and you can share your comment with us. Fabi, are you there? Okay, so I'll move to James, and maybe Fabi will be able to join us in a sec. James, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay. Could you go ahead and you made a comment earlier, and I'm not able to access that, so I'm wondering if you could go ahead and share that with us.
Okay, it was around the climate between GTC. I guess my question was, do you have any knowledge or suggestions on how GTC can impact the climate between GTC and your partnering high schools, like between our resources at the college and the high school there?
Oh, that's a great question,
that is a great question. Yeah.
Well, it's a huge question because I think it's a huge undertaking that takes time. But I think to start to get at bringing 2 entities together, and you hear this all the time, but it really starts with relationships. And more specifically, how programs have been able to do that is through focus groups, advisory teams, are a couple of ways, inviting members from both institutions to program events. Make sure that you keep the communication up with those entities about success that students are having in your program, and just keep them aware of the goings-on, basically, I think, in your program, and provide opportunities where individuals from both entities are in the same room around a common subject. And again, oftentimes that happens through advisory groups, which are extremely important.
And can I add to that quickly, too, because I think you said something well there, Prentice, about, first of all, James, this really is a big question. And that idea, as Prentice just mentioned, that coming together around commonality. And I think that programs want to, people are doing this work, and I believe they're doing this work because they want to see students be successful. And so I think bringing people around the table with that commonality. You want to see students be successful. We want to see students be successful. So let's get around the table and let's talk about what we can do in order to make that happen. And then my suggestion would be that that next step would be visioning. So coming around the table together to talk about the commonalities that you want to see for students, and then visioning as far as how to make that possible.
And you know, this actually really connects with one of the last slides that Galen mentioned that had to do with engaging teachers and experiences that create professional development experiences where essentially teachers are practicing incorporating the big ideas, but the key piece of that is the creation of a community of practice. Could be a strategy too. Great question, James. Thanks. Let's see who else we have. Let's see. Folks, if you have questions, I would ask you to use the raised hand function, and what we'll do for the remainder of this is unmute you so that you can just speak verbally to ask your question as opposed to typing it. So, any other questions out there? All right. All right. So once again, we thank you for joining us. Wanted to make you aware of a recording of this webinar and accompanying materials such as this PowerPoint, the David Conley article, and we'll also have a sheet of source material related to the college readiness work. It looks like we have a comment from another individual. So James, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you again.
Okay,
and you're on.
Thanks, man. I just want to say thank you. I believe that this was a very good webinar. I really appreciate it. I think the 5 dimensions you guys went over are going to be very influential and very helpful as we take on our process here. Man, I just wanted to say thank you. You guys did a great job today.
You bet. Thank you. And let us know how things go, James, as you begin to incorporate some of these strategies.
Yeah. Okay. And I wanted to add, thank you again, James. And I wanted to add to just a plug for, as we mentioned when we first got started, this was really a very broad overview. At the PLC, as you'll see in the slide here, we've got the PLC workshop that's happening where we were going to go into greater depth of this and have some other supporting tools that can help in getting this work implemented. In addition, there is also going to be another workshop at the PLC on mindset and strategies and ways to help students develop, first of all, to understand the growth mindset versus the fixed mindset, and then to learn more about how, as an instructor and as a program, you can foster the development of a mindset that really supports college readiness. And it's really looking forward to delving into that as well during the PLC.
All right. So with that said, once again, we thank you for your time. And within the next 2 days, you'll have access to these materials on Gateway Live. In fact, for the attendees here on the call, I'll send out a link, and that way you'll be able to access the materials. So thank you, and have a great day.